It is midnight in Washington, 5 in London, and 2 on a Wednesday afternoon here in Seoul. I'm Moon Gon-young. Let's go check out the main stories we're following at this hour. President Park Geun-hye is off to India on a trip aimed at opening the world's second most populous nation to more Korean businesses and laying the foundation for winning construction projects in a nation with a massive demand for infrastructure. Reforms of bad practices that disturb fair market competition will be carried out as part of the Korean government's 3-year economic innovation plan. We'll have the specifics. And voting is due to resume in Egypt in a 2-day referendum on a new constitution drawn up since the military forced out Islamist President Mohamed Morsi. With security tight, Tuesday's voting was reported to be broadly peaceful. Nevertheless, 9 people died in clashes involving Morsi supporters. We'll have those stories and more, but let's start with President Park Geun-hye's state visit to India and Switzerland. The Korean leader, who left for India within the past hour or so, wants to open up India's lucrative nuclear power plant industry to local firms. Before setting off on her self-described sales diplomacy tour, the president spoke to an Indian broadcaster about Korea-India economic relations as well as North Korea issues. Arirang News Han Da-eun has our top story.
President Park Geun-hye is powering ahead with her sales diplomacy drive. In an interview with India's DD-TV held prior to her trip to India, President Park said Korea can be a very good partner to the South Asian country in the nuclear power plant sector, as it has ample experience in plant construction and operation. She stressed that Korea has not had any major plant accidents since launching commercial operations in 1978. She added the safety of Korea's plants has been further enhanced as the country has learned the lessons of Japan's Fukushima nuclear disaster. With regards to the Korea-India Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, or CEPA, which took effect in 2010, the president said a comprehensive amendment of the pact is needed to bring more economic benefits to both countries. She explained, in order to hit the target mark of $100 billion in bilateral trade, laws on double taxation need to be amended to boost investment. The president also pointed out that the usage rate of the CEPA only stands at 40%, as India's current tariffs are lower than the CEPA tariffs. She also expressed hope that the Indian government continues to support Korean companies, including steelmaker POSCO, which has been working on a project in the Indian state of Odisha for 8 years now. When asked about North Korea, President Park said it's a great pity Pyongyang turned down Seoul's offer to resume inter-Korean family reunions for those separated since the Korean War. But she added she will continue to make efforts to set up a platform for reunification by convincing the North to denuclearize while expanding humanitarian aid and non-governmental exchanges. In India, President Park is scheduled to hold bilateral talks with Prime Minister Manmohan Singh and discuss ways to further develop the two countries' cooperation in various fields, ranging from economic affairs to science and information communications technology. Han Da-eun, Arirang News.
Well, Korea's finance minister says that the government will reform bad practices that disturb fair market competition as part of its 3-year economic innovation plan. The plan proposed by President Park Geun-hye aims to resolve the imbalance between strong exports and weak domestic demand. Our Hwang Ji-hye has the details.
During a meeting of economy-related ministers in Seoul on Wednesday, Finance Minister Hyun Woo-seok pledged to reform bad practices that hinder fair market competition. Hyun said the reforms are part of the government's 3-year economic innovation plan that aims to pull the domestic economy up from its current low-growth trend.
The government will work on creating an economy with a strong foundation by tackling lax management practices at public organizations that disturb fair competition.
The finance minister also pledged to create an economy in which domestic demand and exports are balanced. He said the 3-year plan will focus on nurturing a dynamic and innovative economy that can weather the economic uncertainty lingering in the global economy. Hyun said the government will work closely with the private sector to execute the reforms in the 3-year plan and aim to achieve concrete results. Under the plan, the government expects the nation's growth potential to grow to around 4% and the annual per capita income level to surpass $30,000. Hwang Jie, Arirang News.
Now, moving over to the job market, labor market conditions in Korea improved on the whole last year, moving closer to President Park Geun-hye's administration's target employment rate of 70%. Statistics Korea says that more than 25 million people found new jobs in 2013, which is up 386,000 from the previous year. Well, the employment rate for people aged 15 to 64 was 64.4%, up 0.2 percentage points from 2012. Well, the positive figure did not, however, apply to people in all age brackets. The youth unemployment rate for people aged 15 to 29 was 8% in 2013, an increase of 0.5 percentage point. Now, moving on to our special series in part 3 of our 5-part series on Korea's industrial competitiveness. We take a look at the steel and petrochemical sectors which have been hit hard by sluggish global demand. Arirang News' Kim Young-gil reports on the prospects and challenges that lie ahead.
Korean steel makers are facing another tough year ahead. The steel market is suffering from a global glut, with supply exceeding demand by about 540 million tons, some 300 million tons from China. Market analysts say the steel market's ability to recover will hinge largely on how rapidly the Chinese government will cut the nation's production capacity. Korean steel makers are no exceptions.
Although the prospects for the global economy are improving, it will take the steel industry some time to regain its momentum, as the global demand for steel isn't bouncing back.
Hyundai Steel is planning to ride out the global glut by differentiating itself from the rest of the pack by supplying more steel plates to its car-making and shipbuilding affiliates, Hyundai Motor and Hyundai Heavy Industries. With an oversupply of steel worldwide, Korean companies like Hyundai Steel plan to specialize in next-generation special steel to gain an edge over their global competitors. With the completion of a new blast furnace last year, they hope to produce more than 20 million tons of steel this year. The outlook for Korea's petrochemical industry does not seem much better, as it is heavily dependent on exports to China, which itself is suffering from an oversupply.
There are 2 risk factors related to China. More than 50% of Korea's petrochemical exports are shipped to China. Second, as China relies more on its own petrochemical products, Korean petrochemical exports to China may fall.
While waiting for a better time for the industry, Korean petrochemical companies are also seeking to boost their competitiveness. LG Chem and Lotte Chemical, for example, are building petrochemical plants in oil-rich countries in Central Asia to lower their production costs and diversify their clients. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
Well, fewer Japanese visitors visited Korea last year, primarily due to the depreciation of the yen. Statistics Korea says some 2.7 million Japanese tourists came to Korea last year, roughly 22% less than the previous year. The travel industry says that a weak yen is one of the main reasons for the sharp drop in the number of Japanese visitors to Korea. Conversely, the number of Koreans traveling to Japan continues to surge, with over 2.3 million travelers having visited Japan last year, which represents a 21% increase from a year earlier. In May alone, some 228,000 tourists visited Japan, a 45% jump from the same month in 2012. And taking a brief look at how the local stock market is doing at this hour. Seoul shares moved higher in early trading on this Wednesday after a robust consumer spending report reassured investors the U.S. economy was on a firm footing, but the yen resumed its retreat against the dollar and the won to cap gains. As of 1:30 p.m. Korea time, the benchmark KOSPI was up 0.3%, trading at 1952, while the tech-heavy KOSDAQ was also trading in positive territory by more than 0.5%. On the foreign exchange counter, the Korean currency was trading weaker against the greenback at a bit shy of 1,063 won. Well, the National Tax Service here in Korea says it has launched a simplified system for people wanting to file their income tax returns online. Starting this Wednesday, taxpayers will be able to get information on the 12 categories for which they can receive basic tax deductions, including healthcare, education, and insurance online. The NTS website also provides the phone numbers of organizations that taxpayers can turn to for help with their returns. The agency expects that some 500,000 foreign workers will file tax returns this year compared to the 474,000 who filed last year.
All of the day's important events. Events close to home, around the world.
Second half last, figure out what orders.
The arts and culture scene and the heart of global business.
Experts added that
Arirang News has your whole day covered.
the legislature will convene a plenary session this Wednesday and vote on the government restructuring.
South Korea has given the green light to 3 private charity groups to send humanitarian aid to North Korea this year. Seoul's Unification Ministry said Wednesday that it has approved a $400,000 aid package for young children in the north, consisting of bread, milk powder, and clothes. Well, the ministry said it is also reviewing measures to expand humanitarian assistance to the north by approving more aid efforts by civic groups. The move follows President Park Geun-hye's New Year's speech in which she said she would bolster humanitarian assistance to North Korea. Meanwhile, sources say that what's going on in Rason Special Economic Zone could be another sign of the ongoing purge in North Korea following the execution of Chang Song-taek, uncle of the North Korean leader, last year. Arirang News Unification Ministry correspondent Hwang Sang-hee reports.
This is the Rason Special Economic Zone, one of North Korea's most ambitious attempts at economic reform. But since the execution of Chang Song-taek, the once powerful uncle of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, the once dynamic district has become a ghost town. Chang had been in charge of the development project, working closely with Beijing to attract Chinese investment. Sources say that several North Korean officials who worked with Chang on the project have also been purged, as the North continues to remove Chang's close aides from the ranks of the ruling elite. South Korea's Unification Ministry said that is a highly likely scenario, as North Korea is reshuffling party officials following Chang's execution, and those involved in the Rason project will likely not be an exception. The ministry could not, however, provide details on the issue. At the time of Chang's execution, the North had accused him of selling land in the Rason Economic Zone to China at giveaway prices.
Chang had no scruples about committing such a treacherous act last May as selling land in the Nason Economic Zone to a foreign country for a period of 5 decades under the pretext of paying off debt.
Sources say the officials who took part in negotiations with China on the land sale were the first on the list to be questioned. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
Former U.S. Defense Secretary Robert Gates has taken many in Korea by surprise with his characterization of the late Korean President Roh Moo-hyun as, quote, a little crazy in his book Duty, Memoirs of a Secretary at War. Gates also quotes Roh as saying that the biggest security threats in Asia are the U.S. and Japan during his visit to Seoul in 2007. Now, in that book, Gates also reveals details about Seoul's desire to retaliate against North Korea for an artillery attack on the southwestern border island of Yeonpyeong in November 2010, saying Seoul's request was disproportionately aggressive. Gates served as defense secretary under Presidents George W. Bush and Barack Obama until he left his position in 2011. Now, his memoir drew attention in the U.S. for the amount of criticism he leveled at the Obama administration for its lack of commitment to the Afghanistan war. The U.S. will deploy 12 F-22 stealth fighter jets and about 300 service personnel to Kadena Air Base in Okinawa in mid-January as part of a routine deployment. The 5th Air Force said Monday that the move demonstrates Washington's commitment to stability and security in the region as part of its larger rebalance to Asia. It also said U.S. Air Force fighter jets have been routinely deployed to the Asia-Pacific region on a regular rotation in an effort to maintain a prudent deterrent against threats to regional security and stability. The move comes at a time of heightened tensions in the region amid regional objections to China's expansion of its air defense identification zone and a dispute over an island chain in the East China Sea claimed by both Beijing and Tokyo. Now, in domestic politics, 8 new members have been appointed to independent lawmaker An Cheol-soo's new politics committee tasked with the creation of An's own political party. Now, new members to the former presidential candidates committee include film producer Yong-Yong-hun, that is, renowned medical doctor Cheon Geun-ah, civic financial activist or Chang Hwa-sik, and current law school student An Hee-chol. The 8 members will give advice to the committee about their own specialized areas. Political watchers say An will announce a concrete timetable about the creation of his new party around the Lunar New Year holiday, which falls on the last week of January this year. Now, across the globe, deadly clashes have marred the first day of a 2-day vote in Egypt over the country's new constitution. At least 11 people were killed Tuesday as supporters of deposed President Mohamed Morsi clashed with security forces. Kwon So-ah reports.
A bomb exploded in Cairo Tuesday, just before polling stations opened for the national vote on a new constitution. No one was hurt, but at least 11 people were killed in other incidents connected to the referendum, despite tightened security for the vote. At least 5 deaths resulted from clashes between security forces and supporters of former President Mohamed Morsi, who was ousted by the military last year. The military-backed interim government wants the new charter to replace the constitution passed while Morsi was in power. It hopes to win strong backing in order to validate its removal of the country's first democratically elected president. So how would life in Egypt change under the new constitution? Under the new charter, equality between men and women and freedom of belief will be guaranteed. Parties will not be permitted to be formed on the basis of religion, race, gender, or geography, and the president can be impeached by parliament.
I came out because this constitution is the best constitution we have had and was done by professionals. First of all, it respects human rights and freedom of religion. It's a civil constitution for a civil advanced state, and this is what we were wishing for.
Morsi supporters are boycotting the vote.
We can never participate and give legitimacy to a regime which fools the people and tries to act like it is a civil democratic regime. It is neither democratic nor civil.
The referendum is expected to receive mostly yes votes, but analysts say the turnout is important too. Less than 33% of the population voted for last year's charter. This vote is the third in 3 years, and nearly 53 million people are eligible to cast their ballot. A positive result could also pave the way for fresh presidential elections. The chief of Egypt's army, General Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, who led the ouster of Morsi, has emerged as a strong candidate. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
He just wanted to talk about his plans to boost his country's ailing economy, but as French President François Hollande faced the press Tuesday, all anyone seemed to care about was his tangled love life. In his first news conference since allegations emerged about an affair, Hollande refused to answer any questions about it, saying it was neither the time nor the place to discuss such matters. However, he refused to say who his first lady actually is, only saying he would clarify the matter before a trip to the United States in February. Now, his main partner, Valerie Trierweiler, remains in hospital where she has been there since claims about his affair with an actress emerged in a gossip magazine last week. Her aides say she is being treated for shock. And now it's time for a daily arts and culture segment with our Lee Tae-ho. And today being Wednesday, it means it's time for our weekly movie updates. Good afternoon to you, Tae-ho.
Good afternoon.
So what do you have for us today?
Well, it seems like Hollywood is set to make a big comeback for this year in 2014 with a slew of mega-budget blockbuster films. But will it be enough to take back dominance that Korean films, domestic films, are currently enjoying in the Korean market? Well, let's take a look at what Hollywood has in store for us in 2014.
Is Hollywood poised to make a strong comeback this year in the Korean movie market? With only one film that placed in the top 10 highest grossing films in the Korean market in 2013, Hollywood is set to open the floodgates this year with a barrage of high-budget, big-name sequels that feature even bigger names. RoboCop has returned, and returned in force. The film features an all-star cast with the likes of Gary Oldman, Samuel L. Jackson, and Michael Keaton, all highly acclaimed actors, which heightens the anticipation for an already anticipated film one notch higher. The Amazing Spider-Man is another hotly anticipated film which promises to feature more action, more explosions, and more bad guys. And Chris Evans of Snowpiercer fame also returns as the red, white, and blue-clad Captain America in Winter Soldier. Also slated for a return this year is the 7th installment of the X-Men movie franchise, with Bryan Singer back at the helm for the first time in 10 years.
With familiar characters and storylines, it assures a certain amount of appeal to the masses. Audiences also have a certain level of anticipation for sequels, which in turn raises the amount of attention.
Transformers will also be returning this year with its first big casting makeover in 3 years. The sequel to the successful film 300 is also making its comeback after 7 long years and garnering much attention from fans. Gary Oldman will also be starring in the sequel to the surprise hit movie Planet of the Apes, and these films are just a tip of the iceberg for the list of Hollywood blockbusters set to hit the big screen in 2014.
You know, we will have to wait and see to find out, but in recent months and years, Korean movies have been dominating the film industry here. But it looks like this year there will really be a boxing match between all these flood of foreign films and Korean-produced movies.
That's right. But if you can't wait for all these blockbusters to hit the screen, well, and you just have to get to the movies this weekend, well, here's a look at the top 5 Korean movies here at the Korean box office.
Starting off our countdown for the 5 hottest movies in Korea, at number 5 this past weekend was the film The Wolf of Wall Street, directed by Martin Scorsese and starring Leonardo DiCaprio and Jonah Hill. The film is based on the true-life events of stockbroker Jordan Belfort, who made millions scamming blue-collar Americans. The film documents his extravagant life of debauchery and drugs, all paid for, of course, by the fraudulent money earned through his magical sales pitches. And at number 4 this week is the Korean film Plan Man, directed by Song Si-up and starring Chung Jae-young and Han Ji-min. The film revolves around the story of the overly obsessive-compulsive and germophobic Jung-seok, who one day meets So-jung, who happens to be the exact opposite of him. At number 3 this week is the animated film Tarzan, directed by Reinhard Kluse and starring the voice of Kellen Lutz. The runner-up to the top spot again this week is the film The Suspect, directed by Won Shin-yeon and starring Gong Yoo and Park Ki-sun. And the top film of the week, once again, is the Korean blockbuster film The Attorney, directed by Yang Woo-seok and starring Song Kang-ho and Kim Young-hae. The film follows Song Woo-seok, whose one and only goal as a tax attorney is to make money. That is, until one day he meets a terrorized student activist, Jinwoo, who is unjustly beaten and tortured for his views. Will Woo-seok jeopardize his career and his future to defy an unjust system? Find out in the number 1 film of the week, The Attorney.
Well, The Attorney going ever strong this week as well, but The Suspect is actually, it continues to do well in the box office as well.
You know, it was really unfortunate that it kind of had to go up against the blockbuster that is The Attorney, but yes, it's one of those movies that'll quietly do well and probably hit over 5 million, which is a relatively successful mark for the Korean movie market.
All right. Well, quite a lot of different things to expect this year, and we will, you will keep us updated on the latest developments all throughout this year. And thank you so much for today.
All right.
Well, it's a milder winter day here in Seoul compared to previous days, but here now is a look at the weather conditions in your neck of the woods. And that is all from me at this hour. Thank you for staying here with us. I'll be back with more of the day's latest at 4 p.m. Korea time.